Gorogoa is a masterpiece. It's also a game you might have never heard of. What we have here is an indie puzzle game that I played initially when it came out in December 2017 and that has occupied my thoughts ever since. The premise of Gorogoa is that you have multiple images or scenes on a 2x2 grid that you can move around freely. Additionally, you can alter the individual scenes by zooming in and out of them, moving left and right, and by changing their position on the board. The goal is to find the correct individual images and place them next to, below or above each other, which will trigger a response and let you progress. That in itself is already a cool and unique idea, and to my knowledge there is no other game like it. However, while I will occasionally dive deeper into the mechanics of Gorogoa, the main thrust of this piece is to discuss its narrative. Because even though there is no dialogue and many of the images might seem abstract and unrelated at first, there is a powerful story to be found in here that I want to analyze and interpret. Before we start though, if you have any interest in unique games or the concepts I just described, I genuinely implore you to play Gorogoa first and then come back to this video afterwards. It's not long and you can only experience it for the first time once. I will do my best to explain what's going on, but some of the seemingly random imagery might not make sense to you if you haven't played the game yet. With that out of the way, let's start. Gorogoa is essentially the life story of a single man told in 5 partially interwoven chapters and symbolized by the 5 fruits you have to find throughout the game. The man is shown in 5 stages of his life: as a boy, a teenager, a young adult, middle-aged, and finally as an old man. What makes his life noteworthy is his relationship to the dragon that is prominently placed on Gorogoa's artwork. The game starts with the boy spotting the massive creature moving through the streets outside his window. He grabs a book and looks up what this thing might be. He finds pages that tell him of the 5 fruits that need to be presented to what seems to be a dragon in order to do, well, something that is not entirely clear. Possibly appease it. Gameplay-wise, this chapter obviously functions as the tutorial that introduces the base mechanics. Zooming in and out, clicking on relevant objects, and changing images with your actions. The game subtly nudges you to click into the book. As you zoom in and out of the book, the scene with the boy has changed to him holding it in his arms. The fruits are now occupying his thoughts and he exits the frame. This is a subtle way of portraying the motivations of characters that do not speak, and lets the game make clear that guiding the boy to collect all of them will be the overarching goal, all without requiring a single word of explanation. It is noteworthy, by the way, that the book shows 2 people offering the fruits, the boy and the old man, although at this point you wouldn't know who the old man is. Gorogoa then opens up the 2x2 grid and introduces 2 more scenes to complete the whole picture, along with some of the essential mechanics. Stacking images and separating them, as well as characters or objects being able to move from one panel to another if they are aligned properly. You then collect the first fruit, the red one. Noteworthy here is that to solve this you need to figure out the first 3 panel interaction in the game. At this point it becomes clear that Gorogoa is a game built entirely around one thing: changing perspective. This is true for both gameplay and narrative. For the second chapter you then collect the green fruit. In this part of the game you can find the first time transitions from the boy to the teenager and then to the young adult. It is noticeable that throughout the latter part of the first and the early part of the second chapter you can see an injured person in a wheelchair. The red clothing actually indicates that this might also be the boy. Clearly he suffered an injury at some point. This idea is supported by the fact that when you transition to the teenager he left the wheelchair but still has to rely on crutches, or the other versions of the person still utilize a cane as well, indicating that he never fully recovered from said injury. An important change to the timeline is the fact that the teenager seems to exist in war times, indicated by sirens, destroyed buildings, and constant distant explosions in some of the scenes. Evidently a war has broken out while the boy was growing up. Throughout the third chapter, the timeline is then being continued, as you not only see the teenager but also the young adult, the third phase of the person's life. Both the teenager and the young adult are mostly shown reading books, but in very different situations. The teenager is surrounded by war and he is living in poverty and fear. The young adult, meanwhile, seemingly went to university after the war ended and became an astronomer of some sort. He spends much of his time reading about the stars, and in one scene in particular he observes the night sky with a telescope. A lot of the buildings in the young adult scenes have signs of reconstruction, indicating that his city is indeed being rebuilt and life is slowly returning back to normal after the war. In terms of mechanics, there's a side note that I want to bring up here. Obviously, most games want to slowly build up their difficulty as they go along, and in Gorogoa you can find a shift in puzzle design in this part that embodies that sentiment as well. Due to how the puzzles work in this game, it is to an extent possible to accidentally find solutions, since the correct responses that let you progress trigger automatically when you put the given images in the right places. That means that with enough time and endurance you could brute force puzzles by trying every possible combination and then still progress without having actually understood what you are doing. To circumvent this, Gorogoa adds timing sensitive challenges from the halfway point onward. The first one is this stone puzzle, where small chunks of coal are set loose from the explosions during wartime and have to be guided through 2 different other scenes until they reach the glass containing the moth and crack it open to let it free. You not only need to recognize the emblem patterns on the walls and the different images to realize in what way they connect, you also need to arrange the scenes above or below one another before the piece of coal falls out of the frame without effect. The timer itself is fairly generous if you know what you're doing, but again, this is a smart way of ensuring that the player actually understood the puzzle. The solutions are now complex enough that you can't just stumble into them anymore. Evident here is also the imagery of the moth being drawn to the flame. The goal of this chapter is to zoom in on the moth's wings, as the yellow fruit can be found there. This is done multiple times by lighting up lamps through stars that the main character is observing in other scenes. Even the yellow fruit itself materializes from a star. This obviously suggests that the teenager and the young adult are studying astronomy or something related to it. The moth being drawn to the flame is also a classic symbol that, at least from my interpretation, will make sense a bit later as well. We then reach the Blue Fruit chapter, where we follow the adult man. This is quite possibly the darkest one in the game. In the beginning, you see the young man, aka the student, and the adult man dreaming and thinking of the same incident respectively, the boy in a dangerous freefall. It is not yet clear when or why this happened, but it explains why the boy ended up in the wheelchair as seen earlier in the game and why he needed walking aids from that point onward. Whatever caused this fall, he never fully recovered from it. Judging from his posture and the intimidating distorted horn sounds, you can tell that the adult man is deeply depressed. There's a discarded star map next to him, and after the falling incident of his childhood, he imagines the dragon again, looks at the map and frustratedly pulls it off the table. A clear sign that he no longer holds those studies in the same regard as he did in his university days. The Blue chapter consists of different set pieces with the adult man, all of which contain religious imagery. You can see him walking in the desert, ringing a bell whenever he reaches an archway, pushing a stone cart while setting up candles, and climbing a steep mountain staircase. Outside of those particular scenes, you can also find images like this one that look like the stained glass windows of a church. This makes me imagine him as either being in service of a religious institution like a monastery, or having gone on a pilgrimage, possibly to come in contact with his own spirituality. This is a stark contrast to the previous part of his life where he dedicated everything he had to science. As stated earlier, this chapter is tonally much darker than the first and the third. The man looks genuinely miserable doing these tasks as they contain arduous work and traveling. Despite the tone of this part of the game, the actual goal is to guide the boy through various portraits of the man's life that correspond with the 5 stages of his story. This is the first time Gorogoa brings all of them together and shows a clear theme of self-reflection. As the boy leaves one stage and enters the next portrait, however, the dragon appears and sets the sun in them, turning them dark. To me, this is an indication that the man is looking back at those parts of his life with sadness now, which would explain his depression. It could signify that he thinks he wasted the first half of his life. In the last chapter then, the purple one, Gorogoa finds its conclusion. The boy, who is now an old man, decides to go out. Both him and the boy you have been guiding through the puzzles set out for the same location, the tower from the beginning. As the boy reaches the top, he finds the last fruit and, as was his plan all along, he offers all 5 of them to the dragon in the way he read in his book. What happens then is probably the most important scene in the game. The dragon rejects him. The fruits turn black, burn up, and the dragon slowly vanishes from sight as our main character watches helplessly and slumps over. You then see the boy falling, surrounded by the black fire. As he touches the ground, the scene turns into a memory of the same boy in a wheelchair looking at the spot where he fell down. The implication is clear. The player's view then travels back up along the tower as time flashes forward. Starting with the injured boy at the base, you see the tower destroyed during the wartime of the teenager, it being reconstructed when he was a student, and finally reached the top, but this time the old man is standing on it. We are now back in his time, in the last stage of this man's life, as he has returned to this place from his childhood. The old man thinks back to the black fruits and the broken bowl, and as you click on his thoughts, the final sequence starts. Going through all 5 of them, you search his memories for the various images and places you've seen throughout the game. You eventually find the one in each stage that lets you fill in the color of the respective fruit, lighting it back up the way it was supposed to be. You do this for all 5 of them: red, green, yellow, blue, and purple. Finally, as you fill in the last fruit, all the panels merge into one, they explode into light and turn the bowl into a sun as the dragon reveals himself fully. Then the credits roll. So what does this ending actually mean? Let's look at this with all the clues we have now. At the beginning there is the boy seeing the majestic dragon in the distance and reading in a book that he should be offering fruits to appease it. The color of this chapter's fruit is red, which might indicate the passion of the boy to find out what this thing is. As he reaches the tower, the dragon rejects his offering, however. He is either thrown off or falls accidentally and injures himself badly, ending up in a wheelchair. A little later, war breaks out and bombs go off outside. The walking aids indicate that he still hasn't fully recovered yet, so the boy spends most of his miserable teenage years holed up in shelter with little to do except reading and fantasizing about the dragon. Despite his rejection, he still doesn't let go. The color of this chapter is green, which fits with multiple meanings. It can signify sickness, but also growth and endurance. You may either see his clinging to the dragon as something negative and toxic, fitting of his surroundings, or as something positive and life-affirming. When the war is over, the boy, now probably in his early 20s, can return back to a normal life. He enters university and studies the stars, thinking that through science he can finally find answers explaining what the dragon is and why it denied his offering. The color yellow of this chapter might stand for knowledge or the enlightenment that he tries to achieve. Yellow is also generally associated with happiness, which might mean that at least for a time this is the most joyous period of his life. Despite the bright tone, he presumably does not find answers, though. The next chapter is aptly portrayed as the blue one, the color of depression. It shows the man now in the middle of his life, frustratedly shoving away his map of the stars and losing all his drive to learn. The way I interpret this is that after failing to come closer to the dragon through science, he then tries a different way by dedicating his life to religious and ritualistic practices. Walking through towns, spreading the gospel, lighting candles on the sacred grounds, going on pilgrimages, and so on. It's not a fulfilling life. You can read the misery in his body language throughout these images, and evidently this doesn't bring him any closer either, so eventually he just stops. Years later then, as an old man, he returns to the tower where everything started. This chapter is purple, a color that among other things can represent wisdom and a higher self. This fits considering he reflects on the stages of his life and remembers all the things that led him to this point. The cumulative memories allow him to turn the black fruits into their respective colors again, and as he comes to terms with his life, the dragon finally reveals itself. That, as far as my understanding goes, is the story of Gorogoa. It's a subtle story told in a very unusual manner, but to me it's an extremely compelling one. It's a story about changing your perspective, looking at things in different ways and understanding that threads and connections can be found everywhere. This describes both the main gameplay loop, where you bring scenes together that at first glance do not seem to fit together at all, as well as what the main character does to eventually find peace for himself. Looking at the first scene, you will notice that the image the boy finds that tells him to offer up the fruit to the dragon has both him and the old man holding the bowl. Presumably the boy got burned because he tried doing it alone without the wealth of experiences that he will possess with advanced age. I think that is what Gorogoa tries to convey. Time can heal many wounds. Sometimes you will try something for years with all of your energy and you might still not succeed. What's important to finding true happiness though is being able to look back at how you spent your life and accepting all of it as part of yourself. Naturally, the dragon in Gorogoa isn't meant to be taken literally, neither is the journey of the man. They're metaphors you could fill with things from your own existence. The dragon represents obsession, fueled by curiosity or trauma. The journey of the man represents dedicating yourself to a single subject and ending up with regrets. Thankfully, Gorogoa does not mock or condemn this kind of pursuit. In my interpretation, the ultimate message here is that your life doesn't have to be filled with success, money, fame, or even mastery. What's important is that the person at the end of the road is who you are. Boken, signing out.